Hey everyone, I've been platinuming every Final Fantasy Pixel Remaster. And I'm on to the fourth one. And the fourth one really stuck with me. And it's one I'll be thinking about from years from now. You know, and let's talk about why. So like I said, I've been going through the Pixel Remasters in order. I've been platinuming each one, doing the grind, doing everything. So with 1 through 3, I like them. They're good, but they're just of its time. 1 and 3, they're crystal quests. You find the crystal, you beat the bad guy, you restore balance, and then you save the world. 2 actually broke the mold a little bit. It actually had a named lead, Furion. It was a rebellion story, and it was really kind of reaching for something. But to me, across all 3, you're not really playing for the story. In my perspective, you're playing through all 3 to see where Final Fantasy came from, where it all started. And these games weren't empty or anything. They definitely had stories. And the problem really wasn't that there was never no story between the 3 games. It was more or less they had nobody to tell it through. Meanwhile, all of them were really trying to invent something as you go. The second Final Fantasy threw out experience points and grew your stats by, well, using them. The third one really built out the job system that we see today in a lot of the other Final Fantasies. They were definitely experiments that worked. They just hadn't really figured out the whole character arc part of things in Final Fantasy. That's where 4 came in. Now let's get into it. Final Fantasy 4 is where Final Fantasy that you remember actually starts. People think the first game with the main character is the 4th one, and that's not quite it. The second Final Fantasy had Furion. He had a name and he had a storyline. So I really want to be precise about what 4 actually did. And it's not that Cecil is the first lead that had a name. It's honestly that Cecil is the first character that had an arc. He's a guy that starts as one person in the beginning game and then genuinely ends as a different person. And you really feel for that arc right in the beginning of the game. The game opens and you're Cecil, captain of the King's airship fleet, and you're flying home from your mission. And the mission that Cecil was doing was taking a crystal from a town where our mages couldn't fight back. And this was on the King's orders. And while you're doing it, you're kind of sick about what you just did. And that's what the 4th really does first. It hands you a hero that already is doing something that he doesn't agree with. He's the King's Dark Knight, and he's starting to see all the orders he's following from the King might be the wrong ones. And that's where the arc starts. And this is before you've made a single choice on your own. And really, the game is all about him working through this. And that's where 4 set all this up. It became the template for arcs. Every Final Fantasy lead had something like this. They're all characters that are working through something throughout the entire game that you play. And that's why I say the model starts here with Cecil. And there's really a moment that shows it better than I can really explain it. And without spoiling too much, Cecil had to face an older version of himself to become something new. And he literally had to stop fighting to win. And this is kind of wild for a game that came out decades ago, before all these other tropes came out for other RPGs. And this is where the story really had its bones. 1 through 3 had its thin stories, and 4 really had its stakes. The game really didn't shy away from losing people. Or, and that's what I love, it made you think that you lost some people. People sacrifice themselves throughout the game. People disappear through huge stretches of the game. You genuinely don't know if they're ever coming back or if they're actually dead. The game commits hard enough for you to really believe that's what's happening. It's Game of Thrones before, well, Game of Thrones, anything goes. And at one point, a character stops and basically points out that everyone keeps nobly sacrificing themselves throughout this entire journey. And somehow, no one ever really stays gone. The game is self-aware by its own habit, decades ago. It's quite intriguing. And that's kind of one of those things that I meant whenever I said 4 is different. You kind of know Cecil's safe enough, but everyone around here, potentially, fair game. And it's not like this really made me expect deaths in every other game after this, because it didn't. It's just that 4 was willing to push against something that maybe other RPGs and other stories just weren't willing to try out. Now to transition over to a little bit, let me talk about a certain character. And I'm not here to tell you that this game is flawless. And I'm going to try to keep this light to not really spoil too much, but there's a character called Kain. Kain is Cecil's best friend. He's a rival, a dragoon, and across the whole game, his loyalty, what you can say, is not stable. He's with you, he's not, then he's not with you again. He's just really all over the place. It's kind of like you almost get whiplash with the turns with everything going on. The arc is good on paper, but the delivery is a little thin. The reason his loyalty keeps flipping is pretty sound on paper, but this is maybe a problem of its time potentially, because there's no cutscenes, there's no real dialogue happening of what's going on. There is some explanation behind why he keeps flipping, and it makes sense because, not to spoil too much, but it's not entirely his fault. Everything happens so quick, the whole middle performance, the whole length of everything going on with Kain is missing. And towards the ending, everyone gets their happy ending except for him. He kind of just walks off alone. It hits pretty hard, and it's not really his fault throughout the whole thing, but he punishes himself throughout the entire thing. And nobody really stops him and says, you know, hey man, it's not your fault of what happened. They all just kind of let him go and do his thing. It just seems kind of sad. And I kind of wish there was more substance to the whole Kane arc because I feel like it was missing something in the between. Now to shift over, there's really two practical things about this whole game. First, I used boost in the game. Now, if you've put years into RPGs, boost is unreal. You can turn on 4x speed, you can turn off encounters, you can crank up the XP and the money gain that you get. Anybody playing this for the first time, I probably wouldn't recommend doing the boost unless you're just really struggling with the game. And the reason being is I feel like you kind of would rob yourself from the actual experience of the game originally. But a veteran like me platinuming it turned a 30-hour game into like a 15, 17-hour game. And frankly, I've done it with all of them, and I'm going to do it again with the rest of them. And this time when I cranked up the XP and I over-leveled myself, and I steamrolled through everything in the game that used to give me trouble in the past. And that's kind of a cool thing. You don't really have a lot of games that let you feel that. It's not a bad thing. Most games are tuned in a way where everything is balanced. Everything is the way the developers really want it to be whenever you first play through the game. You know, encounters want you to be sweating while you play the game. And the boosts really make you feel powerful. Not like God mode powerful. You're just clearly above the curve. You're walking through fights that usually try to scare you or just were a little bit more cautious about. And you don't really get to feel that very often. And I really enjoyed the hell out of it. I would say I'd probably hand all of the pixel remasters to any newer Final Fantasy player that wanted to try the older versions of the games. The sprite art is great. The scores are redone. There's an option to, you know, put it back to the classic font and music and everything too. And I just would recommend starting fresh with this one. So where do I sit with all of this? If somebody asked me where Final Fantasy actually started, not which one actually came first in the series, but the first one that has a story that grabs you with a story that changes, my answer would always be 4 now. That's not to say the first 3 aren't worth playing. They are, especially if you love the series, because that's really where all the pieces of all the other games started, was the first 3. The 4th one is where everything really starts to come together. 4 is where Final Fantasy started to become Final Fantasy. If you played the pixel remasters, where did you start? And did 4 hit differently for you too? Tell me in the comments. I actually want to know. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.